This episode of the Better Every Shift podcast is sponsored by The Fire Store. Learn more about getting the gear you need at prices you can afford by visiting thefirestore.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Better Every Shift podcast. I am your host, Darren Zamzow. I am a fire officer up in Wisconsin. I'm also a writer here for Fire Rescue One, and damn happy to be here because we have some special guests back by popular demand. We have the editor-in-chief of Fire Rescue One, Janelle Fosquet. I like to call her the commander. Welcome back. You left me alone for an episode. How did that work out?
I'm so sorry, but the episode was so good. You did so great with Chief Butler. I wish I could have been there.
Welcome back. It's great to have you here because this guest today, this is one of the most fascinating people in the fire service for many, many reasons. And so I'm super excited to bring in Chief Clare Frank, who has served in the fire service for 30 years. She's been a firefighter raised up to all the way to the fire chief level at Milpitas Fire in California. And then with CAL FIRE's chief of fire protection, she also served as a lawyer and peace officer. Yeah, you got that right. Lawyer and peace officer. She went to cop school at one point. And when she retired, she then started doing this thing called writing. And she wrote an unbelievable memoir. It's called Burnt, a Memoir of Firefighting. Welcome, Chief Clare Frank. How are you?
I'm awesome. I'm here with you guys and Better Every Shift. So thanks for having me.
Well, you have one of the most fascinating stories. First of all, how did you get into the fire service? Tell me the story there.
So my brother was a firefighter, a seasonal firefighter for the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, now known as CAL FIRE. He's my older brother. And he knew he was going to be a firefighter from age 2. So he started drawing pictures of himself on tailboard. And then he got in, and after his second season, he pulled me aside. I was still in high school, just finishing it really. And he said, you need to try this on. You would love it and it would love you. So I went to the academy and tried it on, and he was right. It was like, I call it love at first flame. It was a match.
Yeah, very, very fitting, right? Like in this case. Yeah, but didn't you have to, there's something about your application there that was there something left off for your application?
That there might've been a little issue. I was 17. I was an emancipated minor, living on my own at age 16. And I get through the academy and I finish, at the top, and so that the top 3 finishers get job offers. And I got an offer, and I went in to sign the paperwork, and there was, must be at least 18 years of age, and put your birth date in. So I just left it blank. So, I wasn't lying.
Technically, no.
I was omitting, but the legal part of it is, which I get to comment on, is I was an emancipated minor. So I had the contractual authority to act as an adult, but I didn't know how to explain that to, admin. Right. So I just left it blank.
Yeah. And you hadn't gone through law school yet to really articulate the law, the legal side of it yet. But
no, I was a child.
And so your first fire department was, which department did you start with then?
CAL FIRE.
CAL FIRE. Okay. And then you just, it just got into your bones, and you really developed some fascinating stories. I wanted to read this thing from this insert from your website, because it's so cool. I think there's so many of our listeners that can relate to this. It says, part of me could have stayed in the fire department forever, but worn out body parts and a lust for uninterrupted sleep convinced me to hang up my tattered fire boots and face an inherited affliction. Which is now your compulsion to write. And then step 1, admit I am powerless over it. Step 2, unleash it. So with 30 years of pent up stories rolling in your head, that has been really the framework for your memoir. And so now I'm just going to jump forward. You've never written before, but when you read your book, there are just so many creative ways that you've integrated stories and told the story. Where does that come from if you've never written before?
I think it's in my blood. My mom was a author illustrator for children's and young adult books, and I had prolific uncles and aunts that wrote. They just wrote nonstop. So I think it's part of it is inherited. Part of it is that my parents, they really, I mean, we had a house filled with books, and we didn't watch a lot of TV. We read. And I think that just became part of my fabric, reading and writing. And that's how I learned to express myself. Even though I hadn't written anything formal, I always felt comfortable with putting words on the page.
Didn't you go back to school to get your master's?
After I retired, I got a master's in creative writing. I started writing the book, not this book. I started writing a different book. And I was running into, well, this doesn't read the way that really good writing that I'd read. So I knew I needed some help with the craft. So I had to learn the craft. So I went and got my MFA to learn the craft, and then Burnt came after that.
Okay. But you journaled throughout your career to kind of remember. Okay.
I did. Yeah.
Is that how you were able to remember all these stories? I'm reading the book and I'm like, I can't even remember what I did this weekend. And you've got these detailed stories of going back to the beginning of your career, and they're just told in such detail and just poignant stories. I was like, how does she do this? I was amazed.
Thank you. I mean, it was kind of interesting because I didn't really use the journals to mine the stories. The stories that made it into the book are the ones that deeply imprinted my brain or some corporal, part of my body. And that's what I use as fuel for the stories. And then I would go back in my journals to fact check after I kind of had it all out. So
okay.
I wanted the things that mattered the most to me or worked in the storytelling to come out kind of organically, instead of going back and going through the journals and going, oh, that's interesting. I wanted it to have an emotional impact on me enough to write about it.
So why write though? What was the inspiration behind just like telling these stories? Where did that come from?
I always enjoyed writing. I mean, it was, like I said, it's kind of part of my fabric, reading and writing, and just like the feel of books and paper and nerdy stuff like that. And if you are a writer, you have to write. I mean, that's if you're a firefighter, you have to be, there is this kind of compulsion driven personality that is drawn to different things in different fields. And so I would say I didn't really have a choice, but what I did have a choice is I could put it off. Like I shut down the right side of my brain to be a firefighter for 30 years. And I knew that at one point my firefighting would end. And so I had this other thing to do. So I waited so I could do it right, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Was it a cathartic process as well, like going through the storytelling elements?
So I fought that. Like when I'm in my MFA program and there's all these memoirists and they're, trauma memoirists, we call it. And I'm like, that's not what I'm doing. That's not what I'm writing about. And at the end of the day, this is my first book. And it did have a cathartic value. That is just a great question because it wasn't my intent. And in fact, I straight armed that notion for a while. But yeah. And then there's even like current studies now. We were talking before about the show with Huberman Labs, and he's got a whole section, and this is on health and wellness, about journaling for that pitpurpose. And firefighters who find that a way to get some of the stuff off their chest it has some real value, and that is now peer reviewed and science based. So yeah, for what that's worth.
Right. And so for people that don't know what cathartic means, because we are dealing with firefighters, it's a therapy, right? Like it's a way to express feeling emotion through
Processing.
and process,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying is especially for somebody that's listening, and they're like, they have a really hard time expressing things. Just start by writing something, and right. And with that though, my question is, what was the most difficult story to write about?
Oh gosh. The most difficult was probably I had several deaths I had to deal with in this book, and one of them was my sister who had Down syndrome. And it was really hard to, you relive it because you are, like Janelle, like you said, you're going back into detail and you're mining your memories, and so that brings up the emotions of the time. And so that was probably the most difficult section with my sister.
Was it difficult to find the words to explain what the passion was like for firefighting?
I didn't find that part difficult. I mean, I just kind of, I'm pretty blunt, So, and I feel like I have the soul of a firefighter. So if I just put it out there and share the experience I had, whether it was, those repeat calls at the assisted living facilities or the vehicle accidents or the fires and the camaraderie, it was all just came from a place that I could feel. And I had the intention when I was writing it to share with the general public the true life of a firefighter, not the Hollywood life, not the scripted. And, there's a lot of love and joy in firefighting for everyone who's meant to be in the business. There's no place else you'd rather be, but it doesn't mean it doesn't scar you up.
Yeah.
So I wanted to cover all aspects of it.
So for our listeners, let's give them an example of one of the stories. Give me the funniest story that you tell in your book. Love that you reference Gordon Graham's speech. Sometimes that's a little funny. If you want to talk a little bit about that, how you reference that.
I'll tell a story about the book that's kind of funny, and then I'll talk about the Gordon Graham one. So it's the fire service, and we have to have the training about how to act as appropriate human beings. And so I've been to several Gordon Graham trainings, and the message was always clear that he loves firefighters, he loves cops, but that we're somewhat intellectually challenged at times because we don't have new ways to get in trouble. There's a litany of ways, and he's got these 10 ways we get in trouble. And
I'll go sex, alcohol, drugs, lying, cheating, reckless driving, sex, alcohol. I think that's what they are, right?
Yeah. That's all 10. We got all 10.
We got all 10, which is really like 5. So, so that was fun to write about. And then just as a general kind of story, when I'm going around doing readings and talking about the book, some friends of mine are like, you have a lot of stories in there about firehouse, bathrooms. And I said, no, I'm like, there's like 2. And I actually did a reading like last week, and I don't know if you can see this where all the tabs are. Those are all stories that contain something about firehouse bathrooms or toilets or underwear. And so, those were fun to write. Those parts were fun to write. The first time as a 17-year-old girl that I figure out what a urinal cake is, it's funny.
It is. But it also is a great story because it shows your dedication, because you were assigned to clean the women's bathroom. Everybody else is cleaning the larger, let's just say nastier men's bathroom. And you sped through yours so you could go help with them because you didn't want to create this, me versus them mentality, right from the get-go, which is great.
Yeah, I didn't want it to be a segregated experience. I wanted it to be, I'm here for the same reason you all are here, which is to be a good firefighter.
So part of that is urinal cakes.
Part of that is
we got to put urinal cakes in and clean around. Yeah.
Well, maybe let's talk about that for a second. Just coming in, you're young, you're 5'2", you know, you don't necessarily look like all the guys around you. What was that like, just trying to like prove yourself, or that feeling of needing to prove yourself to your
Yeah,
captain?
it was daily. Like I knew on every single aspect I'd have to show up and prove that I was there for the right reason, and then prove that I could do the job. So it was kind of a twofold thing. And I had, hands down, I had the work ethic, I had the grit. Like I'm not scared to try things, and I actually had this. While I would have a lot of self doubt, I was still very okay with being the first to raise my hand and say, I'll try it first. I was okay with failing, which I think is a big thing in the fire service. I think if we don't have that, we can't get better. And my willingness to do that, I think really helped me not just prove to the guys like, okay, she can do this and she can fail and then she can do it again and she can succeed, because everyone has that natural fear of failure. And so when you can own it, when you can see it and then get up and do it, that's a pretty strong message. And it was not just a strong message to them. It was a message to myself, because I had to prove to myself. Sometimes the doubting voice came much louder from me than from them.
Yeah, but some of your early leaders also had a doubting voice. Tell us about,
Yeah.
is it Captain Peters? Is that who it is?
Oh, Captain Peters. So Captain Peters, yeah, the first day we met, he was one of my first captains, and he told me point blank, I wasn't even at the firehouse yet. I was omitting my signature on the sign-up papers. And he just looked at me and pointed a finger at me and said, I've never had a girl I haven't fired. And he didn't actually know I was 17, so he didn't know he was right with the girl. But, I just looked at him and said, I hope to change that, sir. Yeah.
And that you did. And
I did.
I love this story about your first wildland fire.
Yeah. So with him, one of the things that he said after he said, I haven't had a girl I haven't fired, is he walked away and then he turned around and he said, hey, what's the first thing you do when you get to a call? And I, fresh out of the academy, I'm like, I wait for my assignment. And he turns around and walks away without comment. And when we're at the station, we get this first fire, we pull up to a wildland fire. It's, small, it's like a couple acres. And he points at the other firefighters, gives them all assignments, and then he goes and runs the panel and gives me nothing. So I'm on the back of the engine and I'm like in this cold sweat. Like, am I supposed to get off? Am I supposed to go fight the fire? And I think I said in the book, like, I was sweating from fret, not exertion. And like 45 minutes later, they put the fire out, they got a line around it. And he comes to the back of the engine and he lifts up his goggles. He's like, where the hell were you? And I said, I was waiting for my assignment, sir. And he puts his head down and he lifts it up and he's got this bright smile. And he's like, you're the first one that's passed that test. Come on, let's get back to the station. And that's all it took. It was a test. And I think it was a double test. I didn't, he protected me from that point on. He was like, yeah, I'll take her any day of the week. He would say great things about me to other captains who were like, well, how is she? Is she any good? And he's like, I wouldn't trade her, hands off. So it turned out to be a happy story, but it started out like, okay, I was being tested.
And you moved around to different departments at different parts of your career, just through different opportunities coming up. So you had a lot of firsts, like with the first, like a new crew. And did you feel that every time?
Every time.
Yeah.
Every person who hadn't worked with me, every person who hadn't worked for me, there was always, this barrier. And like I said, some of that pressure, especially middle of my career, I'd already, I was in the captain ranks. I knew what I was doing. It was a good fit for me. the doubt would come from within me before I would just go, here we go again. And I would make assumptions like, well, here's what the guys are thinking. And so I would try to jump ahead of that. And maybe they were thinking that, maybe they weren't, but I have to own that came from me first.
Yeah.
You know?
But that's the biggest difference, right? Between men and I think when you were coming up in the fire service, like you had to break that every single time.
Every time.
Whereas men didn't have that, right? Like they just had to worry about, trying to do their job, not about doing the job, doing it that much better to get people to think that you could do the job. Am I right with that assumption?
Well, I would say, so when I talk about this, I'd say you're right, but I also think, the fire service in general is very insular. And we have to be, because we're putting our lives in other people's hands, our crew members' hands as a team. And so I think guys still have to deal with it. Like, do I fit in? Yeah. Am I part of this team? Where's my role? Where do I fit? Am I a rookie? Am I a veteran? And there's this constant, they don't get away scot-free. Nobody in the fire service does. But I think there's an added layer to it. It's an enhanced experience of that when you're in a marginalized class, if that tracks.
Yeah, I think you're under a microscope every single thing you
totally,
do, right?
Totally.
And I see that even even today, and that's one of the things I think that kind of bothers me a little bit is that we're all human, we're all going to mess up, but unfortunately, when someone let's say you're a female and you're new to the fire service, you mess up, it's amplified for some reason.
And it becomes, and I talk a lot about this, it becomes an I told you so. Like, I didn't want to be that person when I told you so. And I talk, there's this one story where I'm going through the engineer academy, and my roommate is a female who, when you just look at her and you meet her, and she's got the soft handshake and she's got the curling iron, the perfect curls, and just how she presented herself as a female and owning her femaleness, she went on the list of like, well, I bet she's not going to pass. And at the end of that experience, and I was part of that, like, I didn't want to be too close to her because I had those assumptions. But what could she have done if all of us had said, I bet she's going to, if the presumption was she's going to pass, the presumption was not that she was going to fail, where would she be today?
Right.
And so that's the question that I would put out to the fire service community is, maybe they don't look like you, maybe they don't talk or walk or think exactly, but like we're supposed to, but assuming they can pass and add something to the team that maybe the team doesn't have, would be a much healthier outlook.
Yeah. Everybody does bring something to the table.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think when someone's different, you don't, because you don't maybe understand that person as much, it might be a little more difficult for you to understand what that is, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't look and try and communicate to bring that out. Right. Like you said,
well, Sam, I wish everyone were like you.
Well, I think I'm the person everyone goes, what is this guy bringing to the table? I think that's really what it's been. So left-handed Pollock without any athletic talent and room temperature IQ. I guess I see it. I get to talk to unbelievable, inspiring people like yourself, but it wasn't always that way too for you. Like, so you started to build up through the ranks and obviously you gained confidence, but then take us through one of the times where, so now all of a sudden through an injury, your career kind of took a different path there. Let's talk about that phase of your career a little bit.
That was a hard time for me. My feet got injured and the doctor told me I had to be out of fire boots for a period of at least 5 years. And I was devastated. Like, that's it. Like 5 years, for me at that time felt like it was in dog years. Like, well, that would be the rest of my career. I can't do this anymore.
Can I read the passage real quick?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So after finding out that you have to be out of your boots for 5 years, you're driving, and you say, slamming my hands on the steering wheel, I let out a primal scream and then another and another. I felt an aching hole, an exit wound. I was no longer a firefighter, and I didn't know how I could live with that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a moment for me. But life happens, and so I had to move on, and I entered a different career.
Yeah. So what happened? So you've injured. Now you're thinking, I'm no longer a firefighter. Take us through how you recovered from that. And actually, I think it's helped you excel in what you're doing.
It really did. It was 2 steps back to go like 10 steps forward. So I was at the time dating a lawyer, and I had never thought like, oh, I'm smart enough to hang out with a lawyer, but after hanging out with him for a while, I'm like, oh yeah, I can hang. And he said, you should go to law school. And so I'd already been in law school when I got the injury. I went to night school. I'd already gotten into law school because I think I wanted to keep up with him or whatever that was about. So I got through law school. So I was midway through law school when I was injured.
Oh, so you're already starting. You're already in law school and firefighting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so my thought in going into law school was I was pretty active in the union, and I really wanted to advance, labor and safety issues. And I thought so I could apply it in my firefighting life. It's not that I ever wanted to be a lawyer. I just wanted to, apply that kind of training in the realm of firefighting. So I had one more year of law school left, and this happens, and I can't be a firefighter anymore. And I call my brother, my lodgepole, and I'm complaining about it. And he said, well, you already have a path. You already started it. It's a gift. Continue on that path and do in that profession what you've done in this profession. And you will, he was such a cheerleader. He's like, you'll change the world if you just apply yourself, just be Clare. And so I finished law school and practiced law. And I was practicing law for the 5-year period, but I wasn't timing it out. I really thought it was done with fire. And then 9/11 happened. And I'm sitting at my law desk feeling completely useless in this time where more firefighters have died than ever before in America's history. And California's burning up, and our planes were grounded because all the planes got grounded at 9/11. So we had no air attack. And so all this stuff was going on. And so I decided I'd go back to the doctor. I calculated, it's been 5 years. I went back to the doctor, and the doctor released me, and I got to go back into the fire service essentially because of 9/11. So that's that story.
Yeah. Where did you start back? Did you start back in the front line of firefighting again?
I went back to Cal Fire, and they actually had a position. It wasn't back on an engine, but they had a position in the fire marshal's office, and that's where I really got to mesh my kind of legal knowledge, because it's all about ordinances and regulations, and I really understood how to navigate that world in depth. So that was my entry point back in.
Yeah. So now you're back in, and it's almost, did you feel like you were starting back again every single time that you started a new organization or a new position? You had to kind of fight to prove yourself, right? Like here, did you have that same feeling?
Well, here it was a little different because I had to make sure that I was retrained in all the certifications, and I wanted to get like back up to speed. You lose, you don't use it, you lose it. So that was my big focus. I was going back to a place where I had already worked with people who already knew me. So I wasn't so much about proving myself. Do I belong here? There wasn't a lot of imposter syndrome, but it was more, let's get back up to speed quickly and make it so that I didn't lose those 5 years.
One thing that I thought was interesting, a theme that kept coming up in the book was you would have these experiences, or someone maybe had suggested to you, like, maybe you should go to law school, or maybe you should try this or try that. And these were things that you had never thought of
No.
before.
Yeah.
And it was like a constant reimagining of your future. And were you surprised at the level of surprises that kind of came along your journey? And like, because I don't think when you that early you would have ever imagined where you ended up, right? And
no, like I would never sit a kid down. They would never put me in charge of, career counseling for high school kids where I go, oh, just do this and you'll be fine.
I think you're more like this, like lawyer, firefighter, like, cop. Yeah.
But I'm a dare-based person. You tell me I can't do something, or you dare me to do something, I'm like, oh, I'm all in. And so that's just kind of part of how I'm wired. And no, I did not expect this life. I did not expect this career. When I got into the fire service, I thought captain, I'm always going to be attached to the engine. That's my love. That's my, boots on the ground. And even, I busted through that. So yeah, I did not expect this life, but I feel kind of like the best analogy is and it's apt because I'm largely, I consider Santa Cruz my hometown. I'm like a surfer, when the wave comes and you can ride it, get up there and paddle hard and take the ride you can, because that's, we don't know if we get more than one life. So paddle hard, ride hard.
Well, I think it's interesting too, though, because like there was definitely times where I think the book even starts, right, where you've been pitched a new position and you're like, oh no,
no, absolutely not
doing
that.
And
that's
at
what.
all.
Yeah, I wanted to ask that. So, how did Chief become about? Because I can imagine you're like, captain. That's it, Chief. Heck no. So, how did you get to that position then?
Yeah, so I think I think Janelle actually put it really well. If somebody puts an idea in my head that isn't in my head, I consider it. I'm pretty, my bosses used to say that I'm seldom in doubt, but not always right. And so, but I do I just have these opinions and I go forge through and I get like tunnel vision on my own self and my own life and what's best for the fire service or what's best for my crew or, and so when somebody pokes at me from a different direction, I'll accept it. So I kept getting poked like, yeah, you should consider this. And I respond to the pokes. So that's kind of how it happened.
Who is the one that?
And there might have been red wine involved, but
well, who is the one who poked you to be chief? Let's think about chief.
So chief of Milpitas, it was my brother and my initial training captain. When I went through the firefighter academy to become a firefighter, age 17, there was a guy called CK, and he, later in my career, he's like, "What are you doing? You need to keep going. Why are you cruising? Let's go." And then my brother confirmed that. I always call my brother. Like, okay, he says this. And then my husband at that point was very much on board too. He's like, "Yeah, what are you doing?" And a lot of it, and because this show is real, I will say the interim promotions before chief, it was always a consideration was like, well, who am I going to have to work for if I don't take the exam? And that in those middle year engineer, captain, those levels, I'm like, no, I got to take the test because I don't want to work for X, Y, or Z.
The Fire Store, equipping protectors with passion. Every decision we make as a company is about you, our customer. We wouldn't be where we are today without you, and we don't take that lightly. We understand that having the right gear can mean the difference between life and death. Our goal is to get you the gear you need, when you need it, at prices you can afford. Visit us at thefirestore.com for everything but the truck, and shop our family of brands, including Streamlight, MSA, lion, fleer, and more. Now let's get back to the show.
Well, I love the quote that you said. Your brother was also a chief.
Yeah.
And you're talking to your brother, and you're like, hey, if we were chiefs, we'd restructure Cal Fire Service. And we thought you had it all figured out. But then later you're like, okay, maybe those ideas just didn't fit. I mean, so now you're a chief with this expectation possibly to come in, and then reality sets. So talk about that experience for you. And also, like, both you and your brother, what was Thanksgiving like, for gosh sakes, with you guys?
So that story was, we were coming back from campaign fire assignments. He was in the information and I was in plans, and we're driving back the I-5, the long drive from Southern California to Northern California, and we're changing the fire service. We're like, if I were a chief, I'd do this, and we'd fix this, and he and I would diverge on some things. But we'd make our points and we'd argue. And by the end of the drive, we had the fire service fixed. I mean, it was dialed. Everything from shifts to overtime to injuries, we had it fixed. And then, fast forward 10, 15 years later, and we're both chiefs, and we're like, oh my God, that would never work. What were we thinking?
We always think we know better, right? And the powers that be.
But then, the reality of being a chief, oddly, the position, once I was in it, didn't really daunt me, because I'd already I've been through all the ranks, and Cal Fire is so active and so busy and so big that I felt really prepped for this. My first chief job was in a municipal department for a city of about 75,000 that would go to about 120 during the work week, because it was in Silicon Valley. So it would get this huge push on daytime population. But it was a really manageable city. Like I was used to Cal Fire, where, okay, we got a meeting at noon, and you would have to leave at 9 a.m. to make a noon meeting, because, and in Cal Fire, in Milpitas, I was like always, early. I'm like, I drove across town and here I am at City Hall. So it wasn't daunting, but it was really good experience for me, and really good for me to understand a pure municipal fire department and what drives it and what the issues are for the firefighters that are in this smaller space for 30 years. I mean, they all know each other, and they all know, you live with the same people in a, 4 or 5 station department for 30 years. You're going to love them and you're going to hate them. Mm-hmm. And you can't get away from them if you're in that department. And that was I'm like, well, you can't just transfer 2 counties away, or, get onto a helicopter assignment, or go work in a prison firefighter camp, or those options aren't available. So it was a really different dynamic, and that was really educational for me.
I love the Milpitas, like your creed or your 3 rules at Milpitas Fire, which I think, our listeners can relate to and maybe hone in on it. And you said 3 rules at Milpitas Fire were: act like an adult when representing the department. So basically, when you're on calls, don't act like idiots. Yeah. Use common sense, debatable sometimes, and then own your mistakes. And that's it. Is that your creed that you kind of adapted and brought to that department, or is it kind of a mesh of what you believed in, what was already there?
No, I think I brought that, but it wasn't necessarily because they didn't have it. It was just, so this is my first meeting with my command team, and I was coming from Cal Fire, this megalopolis department, where we had, 10, our policy books were like 10 feet. It was ridiculous, right? So over policy, everything, it's bureaucracy. And I wanted to strip that away. I got to be in charge of a manageable size department, and I wanted to tell them what my priorities were. And I think that everything, and I still carry that, like every single policy comes down to one of those 3 things. Mm-hmm. Be an adult, own your stuff. And we make it so difficult as chiefs and as bureaucracies, but okay, somebody does something stupid, we're going to make a new policy, we're going to put a name on it. Okay, that's the Robert policy, or that's the C policy, and everybody knows, and it's a complete overreaction, and it's, HR and legal have their fingers in it. And really, if we could strip it all away and just keep it simple, most departments would find themselves having a lot less trouble if they just had a downsized, common sense based structure. So I wanted to share that with them so they didn't think I was this, 10 feet of policy person.
Yeah. Well, you break it down like, hey, this is the idea behind policy, right? Like, just own your mistakes. Don't be an idiot. Don't do dumb stuff. And then, policy has to obviously support those a little bit too. But, you're right. I think we can get, so involved with it, right? You need to find that happy medium. And so these are things that you've learned throughout your journey. Speaking of your journey and our listeners, it's all about improving and getting better every shift, every day. Like, give us 3 things that, you would advise that particular individual to do.
Okay. Oh, this is a great question, Sam. So the very first thing that popped into my head is trust yourself. Trust this before you trust the external noise and messaging, because you know yourself and you know your soul and you know your purpose if you'll listen to it better than anyone else. So I'd say that. And then the second would be to have grace with others, because we're all flawed and we're living with people. When you live with people, they bug you. Have grace with that. And then the third one, there's a little story behind it. My niece just graduated from college, and everyone in the family is giving her career advice. Well, what should I do? Where should I go? What should I be? And my advice to her, and it's the same advice I would give to people in the fire service, it doesn't matter where you row hard.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, the other question back to you is to think about, and to ask, what did you discover about yourself within the process of writing the book? Because you've discovered a lot about yourself as you develop your career, and maybe you didn't have the opportunity to really step back and look at how much you advanced emotionally and cognitively too, obviously, but did the book bring some of that out? And what was the process of writing like, as far as, your own self-discovery?
I think, so there were a couple things that I discovered. One is that this kind of goes to my grace comment, which is when you have the ability to look back on your life and other people and their actions and how they treated you or how they acted, to put it in context. And if you can put people, you can always find a way to put someone in a good light. So I think I learned that I would have liked to have thought of my firefighting career more in those terms when I was in it, and been a little bit, I certainly wish I would have been better about reaching out to other females and acknowledging, I was just kind of like head down, go, go, go. And I was horrible at recognizing that I could reach down and really help pull people up. I always kind of thought I was like on the brink myself. So I was like in survival mode in a way. And a regret that I have is that I didn't acknowledge that I had the ability to just stop and reach down and help people who were struggling to make it through the fire service. So I wish I would have done that. So, and then the second thing is what I realized in writing the book is I don't think there's a person in the fire service. You can't be in the fire service for a career and not experience traumatic damage. However it comes out, however it manifests, you can't take the hits that we take. Everyone gets it. You break your arm, you see it, you put it in a cast, you're off the engine for a bit. And it's all very acknowledged, right? It's all very above board. but the hits that we take inside from what we see and what we have to bottle up, or what we bottle up out of habit or training, that all leaves scar tissue, and it's hidden. So I think I learned that. I didn't think that I'm like, hey, I made it out. I'm great. I'm in good shape. But no, reliving these experiences made me go, no, there's damage here. So, and I think we really have to, we're getting so much better at acknowledging it, but we got some work to do still.
Yeah. You mentioned in the book, one of the accidents that you had,
Yeah.
where multiple fatality accidents, and you said I refuse to reveal any of the just kind of the way that you felt. You just you bottled it up, and then at some point it kind of ruptured on you a little bit, and I think that's what you're referencing. If you were to take that situation now, how would you have handled that differently?
Oh gosh, in that era, and me being me, I would have handled it the same, but
But
now it's like, hey, this is happening. Acknowledge it. Tell somebody, like, this is happening to me. I can't unsee this stuff. I'm taking a shower. I see this dude's scalp. I need to figure out a way to do something other than push this down, tamp it down so hard that it's going to come out some other, in a fissure, like an earthquake. I need a way to offload this a little bit. And so telling someone, a trusted person, that would be good. And then getting some tools. Like, I didn't know that journaling would help, or I didn't know, some people talking helps, some people, cold therapy, whatever works, but give me some tools, because I didn't have those tools.
And is that what you're doing now? Like, as these things resurface, do you have a set process that you follow to kind of manage that more than you used to?
No, I don't, other than I pay a lot more attention. I know it's a buzzword and it gets eye rolls sometimes, but I think self-care, like, pay attention to what you need and what your body's asking for, what your mind's asking for. And so I have the luxury of time and not going back in and getting, more scars every shift now. So, but that's because I left a lot of, and I think Janelle, you said it, you had another episode with rocks in the pack. I'm able to take some rocks out, and I'm not getting any every new shift,
Yeah.
So, one rock at a time, you lighten the load, and you listen to yourself and pay attention.
Yeah.
That kind of goes to trust yourself. But what works for me might not work for others. So find what speaks to you. And if it's, buy yourself a hot tub, whatever it is.
Massage chairs are wonderful.
Right?
Just
oh
saying.
my gosh. Yeah. I'm thinking about that.
Yeah. That's my little ritual, but
that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, we can't say thanks enough for your insights, your stories. Obviously, we're going to recommend people to Amazon, the best place to get the book, I believe. And
Amazon, or bookshop.org, or Barnes & Noble. And Janelle's showing you the hardback cover. The paperback's coming out October 8th. It's available on Amazon. Oh, and I got to record the audio. They sent me down.
Oh, that's cool. So you
like
will
this
do audio.
recording studio in Burbank. So firefighters who always want to wait till the movie comes out can just listen to the book.
Yeah, and it does have some pictures in it. So guys, including myself, that's why.
Right?
Yeah, it just takes me a little longer. Are you on the tour? Do you do appearances to sign and present?
Yeah, I've been. I basically did a whole tour for the hardback. I'll probably do some appearances after the paperback comes out. They can check my website at therealclarefrank.com.
Good. And I think it's just so highly relatable. I think, the stories that we mentioned today are a few of many that every firefighter can kind of, relate back to. The car accident one, I can definitely, relate to that, and having a particular captain or a chief that doesn't necessarily believe you or is trying to possibly get the best out of you in their own manner. I think we've all been there before. So again, thank you so much for the insights. Now we're not done yet. We put everybody on the hot seat. We ask a couple of particular questions. So, now we've kind of broken you down and broken you in. Now we're going to really hit you with some tough stuff.
They're really going to break me.
Now we're going to it. We're challenging you just like your career. We break you down a little bit to just really challenge you. So Janelle is going to start with these questions.
Is this where I get my head shaved?
That tattoo. It's a tattoo
Okay.
now. The head shavings too. Yeah.
Yeah, you're part of us now. Okay, Chief, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing the fire service today?
So I think it's twofold. First is this kind of mega fire land that we live in drought-ridden and climate change times. And I think the trick, and it's not just the fire service, it's for the fire service, it's getting everyone to understand, from the budgeteers to the public, that wildfire season in the West and in other states that are experiencing these issues, it's not it may or may not happen. It's not a disaster. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's you can put it on a clock now. So stop treating it like a disaster that we don't expect. We need to shift our thought process and treat it as an imperative, and really start addressing the 90% of these fires are caused by humans. 80% of them are unintentional. So 80% of our fires, if people just would not be stupid, we can, like, really focusing on that would be the way to start addressing it. And then the second part for everyone in the fire service would be just, how are we really, it's kind of what you were talking about, Zam, how are we embracing change in the fire service, the misfits, the figuring out how we can all really work as a team, and getting, what bogs us down is petty squabbles in the firehouse and squabbles between labor and management. And all of that is really of our own making. And so I think if we could, again, to use a rowboat as an analogy, we can all row the same direction. That's better service. And that's what we're here for, is to serve the people who need us.
Yeah, very well said. We talk about challenges within the fire service, but let's talk about you personally. What's one big challenge that you've overcome recently?
It's retirement. It's leaving the fire service. And Janelle read that excerpt about how I had to leave the fire service before, and it cuts. It's an adjustment. It's I thought I was going to be 100% okay. Like, I sprinted to the finish line. I gave it everything I had, and I thought I would be post race sipping on my Gatorade, going, whew, glad that's done. And I wasn't going to write about fire. I was quitting fire. I was done. It was cold turkey. And yet, the book that comes out of me is burnt. So clearly there's a transition, whether you want to acknowledge it, whether I wanted to acknowledge it. I won't make this universal, but whether I wanted to acknowledge it or not, there's been a transition for me. I miss the fire service. I miss the people. When there's smoke in the air, I'm just now, starting to go, okay, I don't have to pack my bag. That it's not about me at all anymore. So passing the torch, not staying too tethered, to things, but still being aware. That's been a challenge, and I'm getting there.
Well, thank God you have overcome that challenge and given us this good book, this gem to read. So appreciate that.
Thanks. Yeah.
So who has been the biggest positive influence on your fire service career?
My brother. He's the one that put it in my head. He's the one that's always been, the awesome thing about having a sibling in the fire service is you don't have to catch up. You don't have to start with backstory. We're just there. We're on the same page. And we leapfrogged each other, through our careers. So he made engineer first. I made captain first. He went into the chief ranks first. But we weren't ever too far behind each other. And one of the things that was a huge benefit for me my brother's a blonde hair, blue eyed white male guy. And he excelled. And so anytime I went, well, I'm only getting this position because I'm a female, or I'm only, I could look over at him and go, no, we're both very good at this. And a lot of people don't have that. So that was a huge benefit to me. So I would, maybe if I can turn that into a message, is find your lodgepole and line up with that person. So you're not doubting why you are getting where you're getting. It's because of you. So.
Yeah. And it's you have such similar work ethic, and
Yeah.
no one would look at him and say, oh, he only got that because
Right.
of, X,
Right.
Y, Z. So
Right.
why are
They
you
were
applying that to
never
you?
telling him that.
Yeah.
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 But it's like looking in the mirror and saying, okay, if I was the other sex, right? If I was a male, well, we did the same thing. And that just confirms, that you both deserve to be there. And it's a great outlook for that. Very, very great positive outlook from a positive influence.
Yeah.
So the main goal of, the podcast is to talk about how we can become better every shift. And I have to mention that, when you wrote the book, there's a sentence that I highlighted. It said, my work is aimed at those of you wanting to kick the sides out of a box someone else built for you. And you said, welcome, build your own box. The last question kind of brings all this together is, how are you right now working to get better?
So yeah, let me go back for a second, then I'll answer your question. And that very much, that quote is very much about, don't try to be like someone else, because that's already on the table. That gift is already there. Push yourself to bring your gifts out and add that to the team and add that to the fire service. So what I'm doing now, it sounds trite, but I'm now writing a book about it. And so I'm figuring out that it's actually not trite, which is I'm writing a book about pickleball. And I'm discovering, I'm just working on a chapter. This is all fresh, and I don't know if it'll make it into the finished product. But the way I'm describing pickleball and why it's different from other, leisure sports or recreational activities is that it's fun. It's recess. Like we don't get recess as adults anymore.
Play.
And there's this whole field called play science now that talks about how good it is for your health to laugh and be out there playing with others. And in those moments when I'm playing pickleball and I'm on the court, I'm giving myself a break from what life throws at us. There's always a family member that needs help, or a neighbor, or your own issues. And in the moment that you're playing pickleball, you're in a fun moment, and it gives you that recess from this thing that is life that we're all going through.
So you're working more on playing, really, right?
I'm working on playing.
Playing.
That was good. That was good. I like that.
Well, and I think that brings it all back to, right, different stages of life. You maybe didn't think about that earlier on, and maybe that's something that you would, like you're saying, incorporating and encouraging people to do. And very great words to live by. So many great stories shared with us, and the book, highly recommend it. And so again, thank you from both Janelle and myself. For those of you that are listening, go over to the YouTube channel, watch us on video. You could go to Fire Rescue One. We have a banner for Better Every Shift podcast. We greatly appreciate everybody listening. If you could share us with someone around you and someone of your crew, rate, review the show. You can email us. Let us know if we're on something or onto something. That's bettereveryshift@firerescue1.com. Thanks so much, Chief, for joining us. For all those that have listened to this, again, thanks for listening. And the take homes here, I really love just the way that you said self-care is really not selfish. You really need to trust yourself. You need to have grace within your career and understand, people, and look for the good within people and bring out the good within people. And most importantly, then just row hard, just go hard and go for it. Because it's all about learning something, doing something and sharing something to make you and those around you better every shift. Thanks for listening, everybody.